Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have another phenomenal candidate running for the mayor of New York City. His name is Zohran Mamdani, representing the great borough of Queens. He's an assemblyman. Zoran, before we get going, what exactly is an assemblyman?
This is the question everybody asked me when I was elected. So in New York State, we have the state Senate, we have the state assembly. The state assembly is basically like a state version of Congress. So we have 150 members, each of whom represent about 130,000 people. I represent 130,000 people or so in Astoria and Long Island City in Queens.
So Zoran, you are from Queens also.
So I grew up in Morningside Heights, and now I represent Queens.
There you go. Boom.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm looking at your platform here to get right into the business. The top of your platform says New York is too expensive. Zoran will lower the costs and make life easier. A rent freeze, building affordable housing, cracking down on bad landlords, supporting homeowners, and ending deed theft. So before we get into safety, affordability, early childhood education, all the things on your agenda and your platform, I'll just cut right to the chase. Your plan to finance all of this and find money for this is to tax higher the richest people in the city.
Yes.
How do you plan to accomplish that, and why hasn't that happened before?
And I know 50 Cent is not going to be happy about this because he's often thinking about the tax plans when he's thinking about who he supports. But I just want to make it very clear. This is a plan to take what is the most expensive city in the country and make it affordable for the working class New Yorkers who built it and are being pushed out of it. And when we're talking about the top three commitments, freezing the rent for more than 2 million New Yorkers, rent stabilized housing, making the slowest buses in the country fast and free, delivering universal child care, so you take a $25,000 a year expense off the backs of working families. This is something we're going to pay for with two major tax revenue sources. And I would say that they do not apply to the vast majority, if not everyone who's listening right now. The first is to take the most profitable corporations in the state of New York, tax them at the same rate that they're taxed in New Jersey. New Jersey has a top corporate tax rate of 11.5%. New York has one of 7.25%. If you just match New Jersey, that raises $5 billion a year. That pays for free buses 7-8 times over. The second tax that we would raise is on the personal income tax of the top 1% of New Yorkers. These are New Yorkers who make $1 million a year or more. And right now, if you're a New Yorker and you're making $60,000 a year or you're making $60 million a year, you pay the same New York City income tax. So this is just increasing that income tax by 2% on those who already are the top 1%. So we're talking about $20,000 a year in additional taxes for someone who's making $1 million. It's basically a rounding error at that point.
In the past, mayors who have run have said these plans will not get done because those people who, the corporations or these rich people, they'll just leave the city. They're just going to leave. What do you say to that?
We hear that all the time. And I heard that from then Governor Cuomo in 2021 when I got to the state assembly and I helped to lead the fight to fully fund the same public schools that he starved for years. And we said we'd do it by taxing billionaires and corporations, his donors. And he said that they would leave. And we overcame his objections. We raised $4 billion a year in new taxes. And we have more millionaires now. Because ultimately we know that the super wealthy, they actually leave at 1/4 the rate of any other income group because of fiscal policy. When they do leave New York City, they leave to other states that are actually described as high tax states, New Jersey or California. It's not about the tax policy. More often it's about the quality of life. And that's actually related to what we would use that money to invest in.
So you're saying anybody that basically says their billionaires are going to leave is full of shit. You've done the research.
You said it, but that's the accurate conclusion from what I'm putting forward. Yes.
All right. So under that same strategy, right? Is that because I saw that Gotham has did a mini profile on you, highlighting what are the main policy priorities that you have, opening city-owned grocery stores. Now, explain to me what does that mean? And because a lot of people are saying the same thing, I don't see that ever happening.
No, I hear you, and there's a reason that you and many New Yorkers would have this feeling about any idea that comes from local government, because for a long time we've lost the public excellence in public service, and to believe is to go beyond what we've seen the examples of. Here's the idea: in Kansas, they have a model of a municipal-owned grocery store. It has been a successful model. In Chicago, they did a feasibility study to see could this apply to an urban setting. They found that it was not only feasible, but also urgently necessary. Here in New York City, we have twin issues when it comes to groceries. The first is people being priced out of produce. Whether you're making $40K a year or $200K a year, you go to the grocery store, you just feel it when you're looking at the same items you used to be able to easily afford. Now they feel a little bit more out of reach, especially if we're talking about eggs and bread and milk. The second crisis is food deserts. Black and brown New Yorkers disproportionately have less access to these same grocery stores. I represent Queensbridge houses, and this is the largest public housing development in North America. I speak to my constituents. I'm asked questions that I don't have answers to. Questions like, why can I find 5 fast food restaurants in a 5-block radius, but I can't find a single grocery store that actually has fresh produce that I can afford? And ultimately, that's a failure of city government, in that we know these supermarkets are not going to be jumping in to help each and every New Yorker. And we actually have a program where the city's set to give those same supermarkets $140 million in subsidies. No guarantee the groceries will be cheaper. No guarantee they accept SNAP or WIC, or that they engage in collective bargaining with their workers. So this proposal costs less than half, $60 million, would open up one city-owned grocery store in each borough, and each of those stores would guarantee cheaper prices to New Yorkers.
Zoran, you, once again, paying for your agenda is taxing corporations and the 1%. Like, that's where we get. I want to reiterate that for the audience, right? Because often people go, okay, how's this going to happen? How are we going to pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. And as you just pointed out in with Laura's question, there is a loss of faith in the ability to do anything progressive, forward-thinking, positive as it relates to government agencies, right? Like, that is seemingly out the window. Most people don't have faith. But on that note, what is standing in your way if you get the job? What is standing in your way? Who do you have to get on board to make these things happen?
So the beauty of being the mayor is that there is a lot that once you are in that position, you can do. Right, the mayor determines whether the rent increases for more than 2 million New Yorkers every year through a thing called the Rent Guidelines Board. The mayor we have now, he raised it 9%. He wants to raise it again up to 8% more on top of that. Mr. Andrew Cuomo, he's going to raise it as well. The first thing that I would do.
To stop you right there, the reason they do that, and we've talked about this a lot on our program, is because big real estate is their donors.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Adams literally said, I am real estate when he came into office, right? Because that's who was supporting him. Andrew Cuomo went to the Real Estate Board of New York and apologized for some of the most important tenant legislation that's been passed in this state. And he has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from the same people who put Donald Trump into office, right? He just got a $250,000 check from the guy who started RFK Jr. Super PAC, a guy who believes 9/11 was an inside job. These are the people who are funding what is now more than a $10 million super PAC. And ultimately, that's why he's going to raise the rents. That's why he's going to keep these policies that make this city so unaffordable, because his donors make money off of it. And when you're asking, why hasn't this happened? How could you make this happen? A lot of it is just political will. Do you want this to happen? And I'm running very clearly to keep New Yorkers in their homes. And so one of the first things I'm going to do is put together that rent guidelines board that determines those rent increases to make sure that they freeze that rent. Because doing so, that puts close to $7 billion back into the pockets of working class New Yorkers, which then also goes back into our local economy. And these landlords, they've seen their profits increase by 12%. They're doing all right. It's time that we actually make sure that they're not pushing their tenants out in a city that's already facing, the loss of itself.
Well, and just real quick, I'm coming to you next, Rosenberg, but landlords right now are just, I'm going to use an old school term because it's all that's coming to my mind. They're just stalling out the people. There's there's vacancies all around the city. And, these rent control places are just staying vacant. People are looking for homes. The landlords are just stalling everybody out. And are whether it was de Blasio, whether it's Adams, if it's you, whomever it is, they just, these people with big money, they just keep waiting and waiting and waiting because they have the money. How are you going to prevent people from just stalling you out and the bureaucracy of things not allowing you to get some of this amazing stuff that you want to do done?
So there are two things. The first is that the de Blasio administration froze the rent 3 times in its admin. So there's a clear precedent. It can be done. It's just a question, do you want to do it? But to your other point, there are about 24,000 units today, at the very least, that are being what's called warehoused, kept off the market. Now, the reason I say the very least is that's a number that comes from landlords self-reporting. Obviously, if they're self-reporting, there's an incentive to not report them all. So one of the things that I would do as the next mayor is change the reporting requirements so that we actually know what's the scale of warehousing, what's the reason they're being kept off the market, and what's the actual cost to get them back on the market. Because so much of the conversation around housing, it's divorced from fact. You're just told these anecdotes and stories, and you have no actual sense of how much would it cost to bring this unit back online? Because we have a vacancy rate of close to 1%. I mean, it's a crisis in this city. We need to make sure every single unit of housing is being used. And like you said, there are too many New Yorkers who can tell you the exact units in their apartment building that are currently being left vacant, and they don't know why, and they know it's been for years.
Zoran, let's Eminem this situation from 8 Mile, if you will. You know, let's
Mom
get out
spaghetti.
let's get out the stuff. Let's get out the stuff that we know people are already saying about you, and have you address it.
Private school.
I wasn't even going to go there first. You're a young guy in your early 30s, and in the eyes of people, you popped up out of nowhere. You've got a lot of people behind you. You know, your commercials are running nonstop during the Knicks games. Where did this guy come from? Can you explain to people, A, where you did come from, how you kind of gained the momentum you have, and why you not being a part of politics for so long may actually be a good thing?
You know, I really appreciate it. And I have to admit, you know, I thought I was a state assembly member. I thought I was an elected official of you know, some people might have known, but every single headline is the guy from nowhere. And I was like, damn, I guess nobody know who I was. But it's important to remember that. So I was born in Kampala, Uganda. I moved to New York City when I was 7 years old, grew up in Morningside Heights. I went to high school at Bronx Science, went to college in Maine at a place called Bowdoin, came back to New York City, actually got involved in local politics because I picked up a copy of the Village Voice in 2015, where I saw that Heems, who was one of my favorite rappers, was endorsing his childhood friend. Heems, shout out to Heems, who was endorsing his childhood friend Ali Najmi for city council. And so in 2015, I got on the F train, got off at 169th Street, knocked on doors, and that kind of started my trajectory of getting involved in local politics. You know, I've been an assembly member now, hip-hop shout-outs, for 3 terms. And in that time, my focus has always been on how do we make the city more affordable for working class New Yorkers. So one of the first things that I did in 2021, you know, as a South Asian man growing up in this city, some of my friends' fathers were taxi drivers. I saw through them this crisis of debt relief that so many were facing. And one of the promises I made when I ran for assembly was I'm going to cancel excessive medallion debt. You know, the average debt that a driver had was $550,000. 9 drivers had taken their own lives. Politicians would come and go and say, we're so sorry, thoughts and prayers, and they wouldn't do anything. And I said, this is something I was going to tackle. In that first year, I worked with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, a union representing thousands of taxi drivers. I built a partnership with Senator Schumer, and we built a campaign where I not only pushed, you know, Mayor de Blasio in hearings, I not only organized with the union, set up 45 days of consecutive rallies and press conferences, organized a civil disobedience with other elected officials, then went on a 15-day hunger strike with those taxi drivers while organizing the policy strategy on the inside through Senator Schumer. And on November 3rd, 2021, we won $450 million in debt relief for these taxi drivers. We took away the ability for these lenders to take these drivers' homes if they reneged on the deal. And we said the city would guarantee this. And I say this as an example of this is the work I've been doing. And in Albany, that work has been a focus on the MTA because, you know, like we were saying earlier, why do New Yorkers not believe in local government? Because the ones that they interact with the most are often failing them. You know, every time a train is late, it diminishes your faith in the city being able to do anything for you. And so I fought and won the largest investment in modern Albany history in better subway service, bus service, a reduced fare hike, and the first of its kind fare-free bus pilot. I made one bus route free in each borough of New York City. And that's why I keep talking about making every bus free, because when we saw from that pilot of those 5 routes, ridership went up by up to 38%, assaults on bus drivers went down by 38.9%, and we saw that the most significant increase came from New Yorkers making $28,000 a year or less. And this is not just a track record, this is the why. And the fact that, Ebro, to your question of the how, the way that we get this done is that we actually fight for it. And for too long, we've had people in power who've told us that the little that you have to celebrate it. And ultimately, that little is often not even enough to feed our neighbors' families. So we need to give them something that is actually worth staying in this city for, something they can actually afford.
Another knock against you, which I don't believe is a knock, and you're on a program that has been very open about its disdain for the Netanyahu government in Israel, and being able to have clear dialogue about critiquing a government separate from it being anti-Semitic or critiquing people's beliefs or their culture. Like, we're specifically talking about a government making terrible decisions, which the population of that country doesn't 100% agree with that government either. And so you've also been very pro-Palestinian in voice, as well as even opting to not sign some resolutions that have come through the state that you thought were too kind of pro-support of the government of Israel. We live, New York City's a state with a large Jewish population. Rosenberg probably the largest out of Israel, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to people who might love some of your policies but are conflicted because they have love for this nation and aren't, because this is an awakening for a lot of Jewish people. Right, this idea that I'm going to be critical of Israel isn't something that is often exercised by Jewish people, because they don't want to, they don't want to talk negative of something that they love. But we need to be honest about this government. What do you have to say to people who are seeing you and maybe seeing those ads about your disdain for the Israeli government?
There was a older Jewish woman who came up to me after a Democratic Club forum in a synagogue a few months ago, and she whispered in my ear, she said, "I disagree with you on one issue, and I'm pretty sure you know which one it is, but I agree with you on the others, and I'm going to be ranking you on my ballot." And it reminded me of what Mayor Koch said, which is, if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues, vote for me. 12 out of 12, see a psychiatrist. And I say this to say that in politics, too often, we speak as if there is no room for disagreement. There is room for that disagreement. We just have to ensure that that disagreement is rooted in a shared sense of humanity. And what I've been sharing with everyone is that my critique of the Israeli government policies over these last 18 months and beyond is a critique rooted in a belief in international human rights, a belief that every person deserves justice and safety and freedom, and that includes Israelis and that includes Palestinians. And too often, when you seek to extend that same belief to Palestinians, you're smeared as an anti-Semite, when in fact it couldn't be anything further from the truth. And I think of the words of the hostage families themselves, who said, "Everyone for everyone." This recognition that that safety, that justice that everyone is seeking, it can only be found in each other. And too often here in New York City, there's no room given for that universalist approach. And I think what I've found actually is that New Yorkers appreciate that. They want a politician of consistency, one who can tell you that no matter which person you're pointing to, they actually believe that that person deserves the same rights as them.
Have you been able, do you feel like, I'm sure you have a lot of support from the progressive Jewish community, because one thing that gets lost in this, because everything seems so black and white, is as if Jews see this one way and not another, when Jews are everywhere on this issue, and I'm sure you've gotten a ton of support, but do you feel like you've been able to convey that message in a way that people are able to get? Because first of all, it's frustrating to me that this even has to be a top line issue, respectfully, while you're running for mayor of New York City, unless you make a really jump like we've never seen to president of the United States within your first term as mayor, probably won't affect what you're doing. But I
let me tell you, it would be illegal because I was born in Uganda. I'm not going to become the president.
You can't even do that. But yeah, do you feel like you've been able to convey that message, and do you feel like you're getting a lot of support from Jewish progressives?
I do, and I think part of it is also that I want to go into rooms where people disagree with me, where people are skeptical of me, because the caricature of me that's been painted is so immense that if I step into a room and I don't breathe fire, people are a little bit taken aback that this isn't the guy that they've seen on TV or they've seen in the New York Post. And that's my responsibility, to keep going into those kinds of conversations. And, there was actually a poll done by the Jewish Action Network that found that I'm in second place with Jewish voters across New York City. And to me, that was just a reflection of the excitement and the energy, and that I felt, whether I'm in a synagogue or I'm just talking to Jewish voters in a park, or I'm even just sitting down and having a conversation in Williamsburg, and listening to the fact that, though there is so much focus, I was sitting with a rabbi and he said to me, I've heard a lot about your thoughts on one issue, but I also want to talk about social services. I was like, that's great.
That's an important issue.
Let's get into New York City policy. And I think that there is a desire to kind of understand, okay, we disagree. Okay, I can see that there's still some shared sense of humanity. Let's also think about where we do agree, and that there's always going to be respect in that. It's not going to be, you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yeah, you have an endorsement for the from the Jewish Voice for Peace Action.
Yes, and the Jewish vote.
And the Jewish vote, which I wanted to point out here in this conversation so that doesn't get lost.
I mean, Ebro, even bigger for you. He got a small donation from my father this week, who hasn't voted in a New York City.
MJ's my man. Go ahead, MJ.
My dad hasn't voted, but actually probably my dad's never voted in New York election. He's from here as a child, but you've won over my dad, which
this is huge. Why didn't you start the interview with this?
I know. I mean, listen, you might see it pop up. I think it might have been $45, $50. You might see it pop up on the receipts.
Yeah. Zoran, really quickly, just because I want to make sure we hit this while I have you here. One thing that really stood out to me, and because I have read so much and I actually know people affected by this, can you talk about how you're going to tackle deed theft?
Yes, absolutely. So, before I was an assembly member, I was a foreclosure prevention housing counselor. I worked in Jackson Heights and Richmond Hill. I would work with low to moderate income homeowners who were, 1 month shy of being on top of their mortgage, and they were facing that eviction from these lenders. And I would represent them in these negotiations. And when I was working with these homeowners, I started to see this issue of deed theft that many were facing. Since 2014, there have been around 3,500 instances of New Yorkers being preyed upon.
Wild.
And just to be clear, if you're not familiar with deed theft, it's, oftentimes it takes place where someone comes to the home, typically of an elder New Yorker. They tend to be black or brown, the homeowners themselves. And this person will tell that homeowner, do you need help refinancing your home? Do you need help crafting the will of your home? Basically speaking in the language of assistance. And these are our elders. These are our elders who have spent their lives being able to get this home and sustain this home and want to pass this home on. And their desire to ensure that takes place is one that's being taken advantage of and exploited by predators who are looking to steal that home from them and then sell it. And it's been happening, especially in the very neighborhoods that we're seeing black and brown New Yorkers being pushed out of. One of the hearts of deed theft.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, one of the hearts of deed theft is Bed-Stuy. And I think we have to remember this. In Bed-Stuy, in the same period of time where 30,000 white New Yorkers moved in, 22,000 black New Yorkers moved out. And a lot of that has to do with, the lack of protection we have for tenants. A lot of that has to do with the rent. But there is also an important recognition that affordability also impacts homeowners. And so we have said that we will create the Office of Deed Theft Prevention. And what that will do is put $10 million towards hiring lawyers and analysts to actually pursue people who are trying to prey upon our elder and vulnerable New Yorkers and ensure that we provide them with protections from that. And another $10 million to create something called the Tangled Titled Fund. This is for so many who have yet to create their wills, who have yet to actually delineate who will have control over their property, to assist them in that. They did this in Pennsylvania. It was immensely successful. We need to start doing this so that we stop letting so many of our grandfathers and grandmothers be taken advantage of the homes that they've spent their lives to build up.
Zoran, other than yourself, we've only interviewed Brad Lander so far. And I told him I'm going to tell you, you're a great guy. and I love your platform, and I'm going to rank you. I just believe also, unfortunately, that we are in a political cycle where drama, reality show, outlandish comments, being mean to people from, these powerful positions is something that is titillating a voter that and causing them to really, think that this is what we should be having when we vote for someone and hire them for these powerful positions. I disagree, but I feel like I'm outnumbered. And one of the big ones in New York City is oftentimes holding police accountable, right? The CCRB, I was just told by Brad Lander just last month had the first time where they were able to actually be effective in their, I forget what it's called, but basically holding police officers accountable. What is your proposal? Because everybody complains about the mayor one way or another. But one thing I constantly see is that the police and the police union bully the mayors of these cities pretty effectively for New York City. How are you going to both be leadership and hold them accountable?
By delivering on the platform that I'm running on. And I say that because I've been very clear about what is the guiding principle of this campaign, especially as it pertains to public safety. It is that every New Yorker deserves it, every New Yorker has to be protected, and every decision we make has to come back from that public safety. Police, they have a critical role to play in creating that public safety, and when I speak to those same officers on the beat, they'll also tell me they're frustrated that they've been hired to do the work of tackling serious crimes, and then they're also being asked to do the work of being a mental health professional and a social worker. And that's why we put forward a Department of Community Safety that would tackle gun violence, mental health, homelessness, hate crimes, and victim services, and ensure that we hire the very people who are trained to do that work. And I say this because I sat with the family of Wynn Rosario, a young New Yorker who, in the throes of a mental health crisis, called 911, had 2 officers trained in mental health assistance dispatched to his home, who then killed him within 3 minutes. That serves no one. That does not serve public safety. And this vision that I'm speaking about, it's actually one that is both supportive of police and supportive of public safety, and yet it's often framed as if it's oppositional. But if you want to be honest about the state of the NYPD, you will know that 200 officers are leaving a month. Nearly a quarter are thinking of leaving. And one of the leading reasons is forced overtime. And so when you have candidates like Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo telling you that they want police to do everything, that actually goes against what police want to do. Because that forced overtime means you do not know where you will be at what time. You do not have any quality of life. You are working doubles and triples. And what we are saying is, you look at the example of Oregon. They took mental health response out of the police department. They were able to take 20% of the calls that the police were previously having to handle elsewhere to effective use. And here in New York City, police answer 500 mental health calls a day, 200,000 a year. Part of the reason why we're only solving, less than 40% of all crimes is because we're asking them to do all of these other responsibilities. And I think to your point about the CCRB, we can't tell New Yorkers to trust the police department if we won't hold the police department to the same accountability that we're asking of New Yorkers. We have to have a fully funded CCRB that when they make recommendations for dismissal are understood as being a final decision, as opposed to guidance that can just be pushed off. I mean, I was at a rally with the family of a New Yorker who was killed at a traffic stop, who was stopped for not wearing a seatbelt by an NYPD officer, Jonathan Rivera, who is still on the force. And this officer was recommended for dismissal by the same judge that recommended Daniel Pantaleo's dismissal for killing Eric Garner. Why are these even questions at hand? Because, when Eric Adams ran in 2021, of all people, he told New Yorkers they need not choose between safety and justice. He's shown himself uninterested in the former, unable to deliver the latter, and this is something that we are actually going to live up to.
Zoran Mamdani. Big name out here. Hey, listen, big name. The name is moving.
It's moving. No, the name's moving.
The name is moving.
No, it's moving.
You're out here.
Now
And
people got to really
out
show
here.
up. People got to show up. They can't just like it on Instagram.
That's right. Early
And we're not
voting
saying that to
is
anyone
14.
specifically, but if you feel targeted by that, that's about you.
Johnny,
Zoran, good luck, man. Listen,
luck.
I know I'm ranking you and Brad Lander. I know you guys are going to be near the top of the card for me. I love everything you stand for. I believe that you can fight this fight. We deserve better. I mean, I think it was the New Yorker had a headline about Cuomo and Adams, and it was like, why can't New York have anything nice for mayor? You know, and I really think that we deserve better than the big ticket options that we've been handed as New Yorkers. So I hope people are able to hear you and give you a chance.
No, I really appreciate that, and it's really been an honor to be on here, truly, as someone who has looked to all of you and listened to all of you for so long, just to have this moment. And I tell you, Ebro, if I'm understanding this correctly, are you wearing an Only New York Parks jersey right now?
I am. New York City Parks jersey. You see it? You know what I mean?
Come on. I'm the only candidate who has a similar jersey on. Let's be real about it.
Only New York.
But I'm just saying. But I think the last thing I'd just add is that there are many people who feel like this election is inevitable. They feel like Andrew Cuomo is going to win. There's no ifs or buts about it. And I just want to be clear that 8 weeks ago he was winning the final round by 40 points. 2 weeks ago we cut it to 20. Last week we cut it to 12, and at the end of the week we cut it to less than 9 points.
Yo,
This is a
Mamdani,
single-digit
that name
game.
is big out here. That Mamdani ringing off.
So if you guys, you mean in other words, you guys look at it, and if you were to end up the final two, you and Cuomo, you would be within 9 points if you guys faced off.
I'm within. Yes, I've been in second place for about 3 months, and now we've cut that final round lead down to less than 9, and we have about 21 days left.
Listen, I need you to get in the mirror, though, and practice a few things, because if you get this job, you're going to start having to say to people, yo, stop acting funny. I said what I said. We need to get these things done, because they're going to try to stall you out, young man. I'm telling you right now. They're going to treat you. They're going to try to sun you. They're going to be like, yo, son, check this out. You don't know nothing about this New York corruption. Move out the way. You're going to have to look at them dead in the face and be like, yo, Dunny, Queens
talk.
You want it one way, it's the other way.
Exactly.
Right. Matter of fact, you might have to make your new campaign slogan from here on out. Keep it thorough. Word to Prodigy. That should be your whole campaign. Mamdani for mayor. Keep it thorough.
Look. If you want a shook one, vote for Andrew Cuomo. If you don't,
Oh, it's crazy. There we go. Ain't no such thing halfway crooks.
Well, you know,
Come on.
There's not. Cuomo's a full-on crook.
Well, that was my
not
point.
Even halfway, exactly.
Thank you so much, man.
Zoran,
We really
thank
enjoyed
you,
the
man.
conversation.